Let's get started. Glad you are here. So, great message here for you. We're going to get through this as quickly as possible. I suspect we'll get out of here at normal time about 7:45, but a lot to cover. So I'm excited. And Mike, I am grateful as well. This is it's a great opportunity to get focused, to spend time doing the right things, and also to spend it with great people. So it's good to see you here. So look, our lives are basically lived in patterns. We all live in patterns. And the thing about patterns, they can be good and they can be bad, but we all live patterns. The time that you go to bed, for example, the time that you get up, as a general statement, you probably do it at about the same time every day, give or take. Whether you exercise or not, that's a pattern. Some people get up and they exercise consistently in the morning, or maybe they do it later in the day, but they do that. Or there are those who don't exercise. Both is a pattern. The type of food that we eat, that's a pattern. And when we eat it, that's a pattern as well. Some people are great about getting up and having a breakfast. Some people, they don't have breakfast. That's a pattern. Brushing our teeth, right? Before we go to bed, that is a pattern. The way in which you brush your teeth, that is a pattern. I'll bet every one of you could describe exactly the process that you follow when you brush your teeth. You follow the same routine. That's really what it is. Your route to work. When you travel from home to work, you follow a particular pattern and you do that consistently. The question is why? Why do we live with these patterns, with, I guess, what you could call a formula? And a couple of answers, I would say it makes life easier, right? When you learn to do something, you learn to do it a certain way. You just do it that way consistently. You don't have to relearn it every time, right? It's like taking a route to work. If you try to take a new route every day with unfamiliar streets, it'd take you a lot longer to get to work. So one of the reasons we do it is that it just makes life simpler. It also, it demystifies things. It makes things, quite frankly, more predictable, which is important. And it gives us the ability to duplicate the outcome that we want. So you can see the importance of having a formula or pattern in the things that we do. The key is making certain that we have the right ones, because there are good patterns and there are bad patterns. What I want to chat with you this morning about is what I call the response pattern, or the process of effectively communicating in sales. So I'm going to go through what really is, I guess, a 6-point formula or process that many of you are probably using in many ways, at least some of the components. Some of you may be doing all of it, and some of you may be saying, well, I'm not really doing any of this, in which case, in all of those cases, it's good that you're here on the call, because it's going to be not only a great review, but also will be very informative for all of us. So look, if I said to you 10 divided by 1, what would you tell me? And of course, you would tell me 10. If I said 100 divided by 10, what would you tell me? And you would say 10. And if I said 25 divided by 5, you would say what? You'd say 5. And the reason is because you understand the formula that's used. It doesn't matter the variables that we put in there, right? It doesn't matter what numbers we put in to the formula or the pattern. If we apply it correctly, we're going to get the right answer. So I believe that if you take a look at those who are most successful in the business of real estate, or in sales, or quite frankly in life, and whatever it is that you do, if you were to take a look at what those people do, particularly in real estate and the way in which top producers communicate, if you were to mimic what they do or model yourself after what they do, you would be better at your job. I mean, by virtue of the fact that they're top producers, right? If you do what they do, you should get the results that they get. Well, one of the things that I know that top producers are great at is communicating. You cannot produce 25, 50, 75, 100, 200, 300 transactions, closed transactions a year, and not be a great communicator. So the question is, well, what do top producers do? What do great communicators do that allow them to get the results that they get? Because make no mistake about it, they could have everything else in alignment. They could be highly disciplined. They could have all of the tools, right? The websites and the CRMs and the best cards and the best signs and beautiful space, and they're dressed to the nines and they drive a nice car. They got all of these things. But at the end of the day, if they're not great at communicating, They're not going to be high producing with predictability and duplication year after year after year. It's just not going to happen. Great sales results come from the ability to communicate effectively with other human beings. So let's go through these 6 things. We'll try to take some time in each one of these and really demystify, because real estate should not be mystical. It's not. It just really isn't. And my goal here is to demystify the process of whether it's prospecting or if it's presenting to buyers or sellers, because the pattern really is the same. It's just the words that we use, or if you want to say it, because I'm not afraid to use the word scripts. I know a lot of people don't like that because they think that they're disingenuous, they're not real. I disagree with that. We won't spend time on that. We all use scripts. The fact that you went to bed last night probably the same time you did the night before. You got up this morning about the same time you did. You brushed your teeth this morning. You used the same route to get to work. All of those things are just they're patterns. They're scripts. That's your script. Your script is, I go to bed at this time, I get up at this time, I get up and I exercise, or I brush my teeth, I get to work, and I follow the same route that I always do. That's a script. It's the same thing. So it's called, if you're taking notes, I want you to write this down. It's called response pattern. That's the title of this formula that I'm going to take you through. It's called response pattern. And I'm going to do this within the framework of an expired listing. So I'm going to be calling an expired. And the context is going to be that particular scenario. So the first step in this formula is to, number one, if you're taking notes, write this down. Number one is to just simply ask a question. What I believe is that the best conversations, right, are led by people, professionals, leaders specifically, who understand that the person who asks the questions controls the conversation and the direction of the conversation. So, of course, in sales, when we're approaching people, we're going to have to ask a question. That's a given, right? What are you going to do? Walk up and just stare at them, or call them on the phone and they answer and you just have to breathe heavily into the phone? No, you're going to ask a question, right? But what's really the purpose of asking a question, aside from making it an introduction, right? Hi, my name's John, and then telling them what you want. But asking a question does several things for us. And I want you to take notes on this stuff. I know this is recorded. I know you can go back and listen to it, but I want you to actively learn by listening and writing down what I'm saying. So asking a question, number one, gives us an opportunity to discover. The reason we're asking the question is we want to discover information that we don't already know. It makes the process of sales a whole lot easier if you will discover things that you don't know about your prospect, about this person that you want to eventually become your client. So we ask the question to discover, right? The second question, or the second thing is that we're going to discover by asking a question is that or not discover, I guess, what it's going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to build some rapport. Asking questions of other people gives them an opportunity to give us their answers or to tell their stories. And when you do that, you meet the number one human need, which is validation or acknowledgement. So just simply asking a question is one of the best things that you can do to begin to build rapport and I want you to write this down, and build value. No, how is that possible? Wait a minute, John, I haven't offered them anything. Well, it's not true. By asking a question, right, and listening to somebody, you validate them. And when you validate somebody or acknowledge them, it helps them to calm down. It helps them to feel safe. And when people feel calm and safe, right, is that not valuable? Is that not ultimately what people are looking for? It's one of the reasons that sellers are so resistant and so careful about choosing an agent, because they're not comfortable, because they are nervous, right? So anything that we can do to help them feel more safe and secure and calm, we should be doing that. Well, asking a question will do that, because if you're asking the right questions, right, not combative questions, like, you don't want to ask them to justify their decisions, but you do want to ask questions that give them opportunity to express themselves. And when you listen, and they know that you listen, then they have a tendency to feel validated or acknowledged, and they calm down and they're willing to engage in a longer conversation. So number one, we ask questions to discover. We also do it to maintain control of the conversation. It also allows us to build rapport. And then the other thing that it does is it allows us to build value. And my heavens, if this is we're in the context of this conversation, an expired listing, we're going to be asking somebody eventually to pay a 6 or 7% commission. That's tens of thousands of dollars. Don't you think that they deserve to feel there's value in the conversation with you? And we don't have to wait to tell them how great we are. We just simply have to use the right techniques or the right patterns or the right formulas to communicate that in a way that they feel it without us having to say anything about who we are and how great our company is. Just simply leading them effectively through a conversation where we are asking the right questions and controlling the conversation in a good way. It allows people to feel safe and secure, and that is value. It is value, guys and gals. So that's the first step. Now, once we've asked the question, and this is, I'm going to do it within the context again of an expired. So I would just simply call an expired. Ring, ring. Hello, this is Mr. Johnson. That's the seller. I respond, Mr. Johnson, this is John Ciet with Century 21 Everest. I'm a broker in the area, and I was scanning the multiple listing service this morning, and I noticed that your home is no longer actively on the market. It's actually an expired listing. And I was just calling to find out when you plan on interviewing the right agent to actually get your home sold. Now, I've asked my question, okay? It was a question to discover. The important part of this question, aside from the fact that I'm trying to discover, is that I made it very clear from the very beginning why I was calling. And it puts Mr. Johnson in a position, because I asked him when he's planning on interviewing an agent to actually get his home sold this time, puts him in a position where he either has to say, well, I am or I'm not. I want to know from the very beginning where he stands relative to continuing to market his home. So it's the reason that I asked that question in particular with expireds, okay? So I asked my question. Now, the second step in the formula is to do what? When you ask a question, what should you do? Obviously, you want to make certain that you're listening. So that's right, Marissa, you listen. Now, listening isn't just simply asking the question, waiting for them to say what they say and thinking about what you're going to say next, preparing like, oh my gosh, I asked that question, but I don't remember what I was going to say next, or I got to figure out what I'm going to say next. Well, the truth is, every one of you already knows how to respond, because this thing that I'm talking about here is a normal pattern of conversation. When somebody asks you a question and you answer, if they're really listening, they'll know the next question or the next response to give you based upon the fact that they listened to what you had to say. That is critical. See, remember when I use the word demystify? This is one of those things. Stop making this so complicated. The process of having a conversation in prospecting or sitting at a kitchen table with a seller or a buyer in the conference room will go so much easier if you'll just simply ask some well-designed questions and then sit back and listen to what they have to say. Because if you listen to what they have to say as a breathing, living, thinking, highly intelligent human being that you are, if you'll do that, if you'll listen, you'll know what to say next, because you're just engaged in a normal conversation. Look, in real estate, we use the word presenting. Give the listing presentation or buyer broker presentation or a price reduction presentation. Guys and gals, I'm here to encourage you to stop using that word presentation, especially do not use it with your clients. Nobody wants to be presented to. People want to have conversations, and conversations are nothing more than a series of questions and a series of answers. People asking questions and the other person listening. And it's a back and forth. It's like tennis, it's like lob volley. We volley back and forth. There's a serve. I served, I asked the question. Now I'm waiting for the return. And if I pay attention to where the ball is, in other words, I listen, I know where the ball is going to land. I know what to say next. I know what to do. So listen to what they say. Okay. Now the question is, how do we listen to what they say? And you said, well, John, that's obvious. You listen with your ears, right? You just stop and listen to what they say. Yes, technically, but I'm talking about actively. I'm talking about effectively. I'm talking about in ways that you can build rapport and build value. How do you listen? Well, the best way to listen is through your body language. 55% of all of your communication to another human being is going to be through your body language, not your words, through your body language. So wait a minute, John, if I'm on the phone, people can't see that. You're right. So therefore, you're going to have to rely more on your tonality, which accounts for 38% of your communication. And the remaining 7% is your words. So when someone asks a question, right, or I ask a question of the seller and the seller can't see me, right, I can't show him that I'm interested with my face, with my smile or my eye contact, because that's not possible, right? I've got to let that person know that I listen in other ways. So I'm going to, over the phone, I'm going to use their words, right? I'm going to make certain also that I am using the right tonality. So if they say something that is exciting, I'm going to respond with excitement. If they say something that is tragic, I'm going to respond with a sense of empathy and understanding, right? So we've got to make certain that we're matching what it is that they're saying with the words that we're using, but also with the tonality. That's critical, okay? So that's a way in which we let people know that we are listening. We're going to, if it's face-to-face, we're going to use our body language, our smile, our head nod. We're going to lean in, or we're going to go back. We're going to grimace if it's something that is negative or is tragic or concerning. They're angry, whatever, right? And then the second thing is going to be that we're going to use our tonality, and then we're going to use their words back to them. So I'm waiting for this seller, this expired seller, to answer. I'm listening, right? And once he's done speaking, then my next step, number 3, is to repeat what he said. Okay, so when I talk about actively listening, that this is the point. If he says to me, if I say, so when are you planning on interviewing the best agent to actually get your home sold this time? His response is, you know what, John, we're not even certain that we're going to sell it at this point. We're very frustrated. We had the home on the market for 6 months. Our agent told us that we could get it sold, no question. He felt like he could get it sold within 3 months, and it's been 6 months, and here we are. And I think I've lost confidence that this is the right time to sell our home. We may be waiting probably until spring, maybe summertime. Well, he said a lot there. So one of the things that I'm going to do, especially over the phone, is make certain that I'm taking a lot of notes of the key words that he used, so that when I respond to what he said, I'm using some of his words. So I'm just simply going to respond by saying, so Mr. Johnson, what I heard you say is that you're highly frustrated. Your agent made a promise that he could get your home sold. He thought he could get it sold in 3 months. And here you are 6 months later and your home's not sold and you're completely frustrated. That's called active listening. It lets him know that I listened to what he said, because I took the notes. I made certain that I responded with some of the very specific words that he used, the very specific words, not generally, but the specific words that he used. Why is that important? Again, it speaks to validation or acknowledgement. See, he needs to know that he's being heard. This guy doesn't know me. And if I don't listen to what he says, and I just simply go to my next question after he says that, I say, okay, great. You know, he says to me, so we don't even think we're going to do anything right now. We might do something in the spring or summer at best. And if I said, oh, okay, and then went on to my next question, for example, so, well, man, I could get your home sold. If I could show you how I could get your home sold, wouldn't it make sense to me? No, that would be a disaster. It's the wrong question. It's the wrong time. It's the wrong pattern. At this point, I just got to let the guy know that I listened to him. So I'm going to repeat back some of his key words, right? So that he feels acknowledged. As a stranger, I have got to earn his trust. Just the trust that I am going to listen to what he has to say, that when he says something, that he's got a person on the other end of the phone who's just simply going to listen to what he has to say. And that if I do that, it permits him to relax and not have to defend his position, especially if it expired, right? Or for sale by owners, or really anybody, because a lot of people get contacted by real estate agents. So repeating what he said and then affirming it allows him to relax. Why repeat? Because it tells him that you listen and that you care. And then you use their words. And then the affirmation. Well, John, what is the affirmation? Well, the affirmation can be several things. It could be the phrase of, you know what, Mr. Johnson, if I were you, I would feel the same way too. That statement lets him know that I am okay with his decision, that's a very normal response. That, man, if I had my home on the market for 6 months and my agent committed to me that it was going to be sold in 2 to 3 months and that didn't happen, I'd be highly frustrated as well. And thinking that, well, maybe it's not possible because I believe the agent. He seemed to be professional. He told me he was. He showed me he sold a lot of homes. So we've got to make certain that we are affirming for them, letting them know that it's okay that they have that particular position, that they have that belief. It doesn't mean that they're right. It doesn't mean that we're going to let them settle on that and we're going to be done with the call saying, okay, Mr. Johnson, I get it. Thanks for your time. Good luck. And maybe I'll call you in the spring. No, all I'm trying to do is I'm trying to buy more credit or get more credit to continue the conversation, so to speak. In other words, I want to make certain that Mr. Johnson feels validated or recognized enough or acknowledged that he'll allow me, and he feels safe enough, that he'll allow me to continue to ask the questions in the formula or the pattern so that we can get further into the conversation so that I can eventually help him see that it is possible to get him his home sold in any market. And I know in this market, you're saying, well, my heavens, gosh, if somebody can't get a home sold in today's market, guys and gals, I'm not just talking about this market. Markets change, okay? And circumstances change. So this is about understanding the pattern. So I've affirmed, right, with, if I were you, I would feel the same way too. Now I'm going to use the word feel. I'm going to make a distinction here because we've got time to do this. I'm only going to use the word feel with expressives or amiables. I'm not going to use them with drivers or analyticals. Drivers and analyticals don't feel. Okay. I'm going to use feel, the word feel. You know what, Mr. Johnson, if I were you, I would feel the same way too. I'm going to use that with amiables and expressives. I'm going to change the statement, the affirmation, that statement of affirmation, from if I were you, I'd feel the same way too, to if I were you, I would think the same way too. Jason says we do have friends. Jason, I know you do. You just don't like to use that word. I could see the difficulty even typing that in. Analyticals do have feelings, and drivers do as well, but they have a tendency to do things based upon the way that they what? Think, or drivers do. Drivers do. Analyticals think, and expressives and amiables feel. So I just want you to be aware of that. When you use that statement, right, the repeat and affirm, when you affirm them, if it's an expressive or if it's an amiable, then say, if I were you, I'd feel the same way you do. If it's a driver, I would say, you know what, Mr. Johnson, if I were you, I would do the same thing too. And if it's analytical, I would simply say, you know what, Mr. Carlson, Mr. Jason Carlson, if I were you, I would think the same thing too. Okay. The reason I want to do that is I want to use their language. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. What does that mean? It means that people like to be around people who are like them. You know, the Romans are going to be more likely to accept you and not put you in the public square and behead you or hang you, right? If you're like them. So be like the seller, be like him, be like her. Let them know that you relate to them. If I were you, I'd feel the same way. If I were you, I would think the same thing. If I were you, I would do the same thing. It validates them. And when you validate people or acknowledge people, that sense of resistance, that uncertainty, that fear starts to dissipate. That's our jobs. That's the value that you offer. At the end of the day, that if you can have a great conversation with one human being and reduce their amount of fear and uncertainty as it relates to getting their home sold or to finding a home, you have succeeded. That's our job. It's to reduce people's fear so that they can see that, my heavens, this is the person that I want to work with, because They seem to know what they're doing. I feel better when I have a conversation with them. I didn't think it was possible to actually get a home sold in today's market. And yet, talking to him or her, I actually think that it's possible. So we repeat and affirm. All right. There are other ways, though, to affirm aside from the statement of, if I were you, I would feel, think, or do the same thing too. You can also just use power words. I could say, good for you, awesome, cool, amazing, ouch, I'm sorry to hear that, right? Those words or phrases affirm what they've said, because sometimes people don't say positive things. Sometimes they say negative things, things that are bad. And I'm gonna let them know that I feel their pain. Very upset. You know what? Ouch, I'm sorry to hear that. I can hear your pain. I can hear your frustration. I can hear your anger. And then I could go on to say, and if I were you, I'd feel the same way too. See, affirming isn't just that phrase of, if I were you, I would think, feel, or do the same thing too. I also want to use words that really describe how it is that they have expressed themselves to feel. Does that make sense? So, good for you. Wow, amazing, awesome. Ouch, I'm sorry to hear that. This is ultimately, guys and gals, the repeating and affirming step number 3 is just simply about validation. This entire process at this point, we ask a question. That's about acknowledgement. Listening is about acknowledgement and validating. Step number 3, repeating and affirming, is just about validation. And then step number 4, and let me take us through the role play up to that point. So, ring, ring. Hello, this is Mr. Johnson. Yeah, Mr. Johnson, this is John Ciet with Century 21 Everest. I'm a real estate broker in the area. I was scanning the MLS this morning, and I noticed that your home is no longer showing up as an active listing. It's actually expired. And I'm calling to find out when you plan on interviewing the best agent to actually get your home sold. John, I appreciate the call, but we are at this point very frustrated. We had the home on the market for 6 months. The agent told us that they could probably get it sold in 2 to 3 months. Here we are 6 months later. I don't know that we're even going to sell the home. If we do, at best, it'll probably be springtime or summer. So maybe give us a call back then. Okay, great. So what I hear you saying is that you're highly frustrated. Your agent said that they could get it sold and they didn't. And you know what? You have a right to be frustrated and angry, especially with what's going on in the marketplace. If I were you, I would think the same thing too. Now we're up to step number 4. Step number 4 is called a transitional statement. So my next step is to just simply use a phrase that allows me to go from that statement that I made to step number 5. So step number 4 is the transitional statement. Well, what is a transitional statement? Transitional statement is really, it's a phrase that allows us to make a smooth transition from one topic of discussion to another. Because my initial question was all about what? What was I trying to do with Mr. Johnson? What was my intent? What was my goal when I called him? I want somebody to type it in. I'm going to take a drink of water. I want you to think about this. What was my intent? What was I trying to get Mr. Johnson to agree to when I called him? Anyone? Is there no one? Jason? Yes. Thank you, Dominic. Appointment. That's right. An appointment. The intention was, the topic of discussion was an appointment. Now, here I am. I repeated and affirmed what he said. I told him he has a right to feel that way, think that way, or to do that. So would it make sense for me at this point to say, well, now that I understand that, Mr. Johnson, let me show you how I'm better. Let me show you how you chose wrong. Let me show you how you're wrong for thinking that your home can't be sold in today's market. Would that be the best approach? And the answer, I hope that you all in bold and underline and asterisk, would be no. Because again, I haven't built enough rapport or value. This guy doesn't know me beyond the 30 seconds that we just spent on the phone, right? I don't have enough credit with him to tell him why he's wrong and try to prove to him why I'm right. It's not the point to do that. We're not at that point. So I'm just simply going to use a transitional statement. For example, now that I understand that, that's a transitional statement, or as important as that is, or having said that, so he says to me, I'm going to wait until spring or summer at best. And I say, you know what? I hear your frustration. Your agent said he could get it sold. thought I could get it sold in the first 3 months. That didn't happen. And now here you are 6 months later, and you're still in the home that you didn't want to be in. If I were you, I would feel frustrated too. And I would want to respond. I would want to do exactly what you're saying you're doing, waiting till spring. Having said that, or now that I understand that, Mr. Johnson, step number 5, here it is. I'm going to ask 3+ questions, not 1 question, not 2, but at least 3 questions. Okay. I'm going to ask a question. Yeah, Jerry, you're beating me to the punch here. We're going to get to that. Jerry's been through this before. Jerry is a great student. I love it, Jerry. I love the fact that you're participating. Step number 5 is about, again, asking more questions. Reason we ask questions, again, is to discover. It's to make certain that we're controlling the conversation, that we're building rapport, and that we are building value in this conversation. And I need to do all of those things at this point because I haven't been on the phone very long with Mr. Johnson. He doesn't know me very well. So I'm going to ask 3+ questions, but I'm not going to ask questions that are on the topic of meeting for an appointment. Because if I try to continue to push for an appointment, I haven't built enough rapport or value. How is Mr. Johnson going to respond? And some of you have found that out because you've done this. We've all done it. I've done it. What does Mr. Johnson do typically at this point? Especially if Mr. Johnson is a driver. I'm waiting for the answer. Somebody's got to type it in. I'm not going to give it. What does Mr. Johnson do at this point if he's a driver? And I haven't built enough rapport, and I'm trying to show him why. Yes, that's exactly, Christine. He will hang up the phone because he's highly frustrated because this guy didn't listen to what he had to say, and I'm trying to prove a point and prove to him why he's wrong and why he shouldn't do what he said he wanted to do. It makes zero sense for me to say, you know what, if I were you, I would think the same thing too. That's right, April, he'll shut me down. I tell him that if I were him, I would do the same thing. And then I spend the next few minutes trying to prove to him why he's wrong and he shouldn't do that. No. So what I want to do is I want to change the pattern of the conversation. It's called a pattern interruption. A pattern interruption can take several forms. I could do that right there. Nobody expected me to do that. Some of you probably jumped up like, what the hell did he just do? That's called a pattern interruption. A pattern interruption is an event that changes the course of the behavior or of the energy that exists in the situation. Okay. In this case, the pattern interruption comes in the form of a question that's off the topic of meeting for an appointment. So I'm just simply going to ask a question that has nothing to do with meeting for an appointment. And it's about discovering and building rapport. And before I get into this, just look, it's about asking better questions, guys and gals. Because I could ask questions that would be specific to him meeting me for an appointment. Well, Mr. Johnson, if I could show you how, my company sold 10,000 homes, right, in the last 12 months, if I could show you how to do that, wouldn't it make sense for us to meet for an appointment? See, I could do that, but I'm not going to. I need to ask better questions at this point because I don't have enough rapport and I don't offer enough value to him for him to say yes to that. Imagine, look, you go into a department store. The number one question that you get asked by the sales clerk is what? When you walk into the men's section or the women's section or wherever you're going into the store, what's the number one question that they ask? Okay, so they ask you, how are you? Okay, yes, that is one of the most typical questions. But what do they follow that up with normally? Yes. How can I help you? Or what are you looking for? Are those reasonable questions? I mean, they're a salesperson. You walked into their department. Obviously, you need help. So they're going to ask you, how may I help you? Right? Are you finding everything okay? Yes. All of those questions are very normal. Well, guys and gals, follow me on this. Those were the correct questions. Those are the questions that they asked, but I think that they're horrible questions. I think those are the wrong questions to ask. The obvious answer is, of course, I need your help. That's why I'm here, right? Now, some people would say, well, no, when I go in shopping, I don't like help. I don't like to be bothered. No, you do need help and you like help. We all like to be helped. The problem is, for most of us, we're trained to avoid salespeople because most salespeople don't know what they're doing. Yeah, Christine says, how can I help you? That's a great question. But here, I'm gonna suggest that we change it and improve the way in which the conversation will go. What brings you in today? Well, that's Rebecca. That's a great question as well. I'm going to improve it even more than that. Okay. So what I'm going to say is this. I'm just going to say, welcome to Nordstrom. What article of clothing are you looking for? Right? If I'm in the men's clothing section, I'm going to say, what article of clothing are you looking for? Now, that is a very specific question. It isn't about how are you doing or how may I help you? Because what do most of us do when the sales clerk says, how may I help you? Yes. Okay. Dominic says, I see you're looking at. Yes, that is another great way of doing it. But let's backtrack just a second here. You walk in and the sales clerk says, hi, how may I help you? Right? What is your response normally to that? What's your response to that question? Yeah, I'm just looking. And Rachel, you said, I didn't get to see what you said here. Let me look here. I got to make certain I look at that. April says, I asked how their shopping day has been in order to start a conversation. Yeah, well, there you go. And most of us will say, no, thank you. I'm just looking, or no, I'm fine. Right. And then how many of you have done that? And then a minute later, 2 minutes later, you're frustrated because you can't find the article of clothing you're looking for. You can't find that thing that you came into quickly to get. So a better question would be, what article of clothing are you looking for? Right? Are you looking for yourself, or you're looking for someone else? Are you looking to purchase a gift? Right? Any of those questions are better than just simply the general statement of how may I help you? In other words, it's about asking better questions to continue the conversation, because if they ask the wrong question, you'll just simply say, nope, I'm just looking. And then you go about your business. Whereas a trained salesperson will ask a better question that gets a better response, right? So therefore, that's what I'm trying to do with Mr. Johnson. I want to ask better questions that get a better response, because if I stay on the topic of him meeting for an appointment, he's not going to give me a good response. He's going to say, nope, not interested. So what I want to do is I want to ask 3+ questions off the topic of meeting for an appointment, questions that allow me to build rapport and to offer value. So one of the first questions I could ask Mr. Johnson after I say, you know what, Mr. Johnson, now that I understand that, let me ask you, if your home had sold, where were you planning on moving to next? Well, we were planning on moving to New Mexico. New Mexico, that's great. What was taking you to New Mexico? Well, I'm retiring and I want to go down there and I want to start a pottery studio. A pottery studio? Wow, very cool. How did you happen to get into that? Well, it's something I've been doing for years. You know, I was a kid. I had a pottery class, and I just fell in love with it. And it's I can relax, I can express myself, and I love teaching other people to do it. Very cool. So you're gonna open up a pottery studio. You're gonna teach other people. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. That is so cool. Congratulations. I'm excited for you. Well, so let me ask you this: had you found a home that you were going to purchase in New Mexico? Well, you know, we had found a home and we had our eyes on it. We hadn't committed to purchasing it, but yeah, we did. We wanted that home. Well, so it sounds like you're frustrated. Did that home get sold? Well, yeah, it got sold. Are there other homes there that you would buy? He said, well, of course, yeah, there are other homes that I'd buy there, but you know, we're not getting our home sold. Okay, say at this point, I've asked how many questions? 6 or 7 questions. And if you notice, most of those questions weren't scripted. I just simply listened to what he had to say. See, it's about demystifying this process, guys and gals. If you'll just simply ask the right question in the beginning, people will open up and they'll start to tell their story, their wants, their needs, their wishes, their desires, their hopes, and their fears. And if you listen the way you normally do with any normal human being in a normal conversation, you'll know which question to ask next. You don't need a script. I'm not saying you shouldn't have one. I want you to, because I'm following a script, generally speaking. But you also have to have the ability to listen to the other human being, what they have to say, and respond to what they have to say. You know, you can't just give them a scripted response when that scripted response isn't on topic and wouldn't make any sense. So simply asking those 6 or 7 questions that I asked, right? And then going back to asking for the appointment. Okay, so I'm going to, step number 6 is I'm going to close for the appointment. Now, as I do that, I'm going to kind of sum up what he said, right? Again, I'm going to kind of repeat and affirm, because repeating and affirm isn't just something we do in the beginning. We do it consistently through the conversation where it makes sense. I'm not necessarily going to every time say, you know what, if I were you, I'd feel, think, or do the same thing, but I'm going to use words, right? Like, good for you. That's great. That's awesome. I'm going to make certain that I'm using words or phrases that communicate that the way they're thinking is good, or that I agree with it, and that I'm excited for them. How many of you have ever had a client say, you know, one of the reasons I chose to work with you is because you seem to be more interested and excited about working with us and getting our home sold? That's what this is about, making certain you're listening to what they have to say. So I ask these questions. Then I've got to get to the point now where I'm tying it back to my original intention, which is asking for the appointment. So I'm just simply going to say, well, now that I understand that, Mr. Johnson, you know, that's the very reason we need to get together. While your home was on the market for 6 months, my company sold over 5,000 homes. And I guess my question for you is, how many homes do you need to sell? Well, only one. Well, that's the very reason we need to get together. So what would work best for you, an afternoon or an evening where I could show you how you could actually get your home sold this time? Now, at this point, he may say, well, how are you going to do that? You know, the other agent said the same thing. We don't have time to get into handling objections. But what I want you to see is that there is a pattern that you can follow that allows you to control the conversation, which is very important, but also gives somebody an opportunity to express themselves and to be heard, so that you can build rapport, you can build value, and ultimately give yourself the best chance possible of getting the appointment to go out and present to them or have this conversation with them at the kitchen table. So, guys and gals, if you have any questions, Russ can take us off mute, or you can put questions in the chat line. But hopefully this was helpful. I know that for some of you, this is not new. You've seen this before, but man, understanding this is critically important, because our biggest skill, our number one skill in this business of real estate, is our ability to communicate with other human beings. And the better we are at communicating, the more business that we do and the more money you make. And I got to believe that this is not a philanthropic endeavor for you. At least that's not what your intention is. So great job on joining us this morning. Any thoughts or questions before we wrap this up? Okay,